You must have seen many changes.
I have indeed. Say, for instance, our games in those days, it was principally shinty. And the great event in the winter time was the Clooney ball play, as it was termed. It was usually held on Old New Year's Day. And that was the property in the Highlands, not the New Year Day that is held today. It was the 12th of January that was held in my younger days, not the 1st of January. Anyhow, on the 12th of January, the Clooney ball play was always held. And they came there from far and near, people walking from Kingussie with a shinty stick. And all had to take part in the game. The laird himself, Clooney, our chief, he would choose one side, and some other laird from a neighbouring parish would choose an opposing side. And everybody who had a common, or a shinty stick as they call it, had to take part in the game. And there was none of the modern ideas about it. We might not even have goalposts, but usually some people's jackets or overcoat or something of the kind laid down and measured up in a very long field. They would play for at least a couple of hours. The game was set in motion, and in those days it wasn't a ball such as they have today. It was a horsehair ball. And by Jove, if you got struck by it, you'd know it because it cut you to the very bone. And after the game, plenty of the Mountain Dew there, plenty coffee, biscuits and cheese, any amount. It was a real day.
Laggan is a community, I think, that is a microcosm of the wider Shinty world, the wider Highland history, because it's been affected by all the influences which have made the Highlands what they are today, and we see the effect of historical events over which the people of Laggan had no control, taking their effect over periods of time, particularly the First World War, then the Second World War. The changes in the way states have been run are very significant in an area like Laggan, because that tends to decide how many people stay in the place, never mind effects like the war. But if there is employment there, very often the people of Laggan have had to move in any case, albeit 3 or 4 miles along the road to Newtonmore, Kingussie, but there's also been the pull in the other direction towards Lovat, which has been very interesting in Shinty terms. And then if you move in slightly in the other direction, you've got Dalwhinnie, the distillery, and all these developments, and the road south, which is not unimportant. But in all those terms, the important part of Laggan's history is that they're central at the confluence of the river and the junction of the roads and all that. It leaves them right in the middle of everything that's going on, but they're being pulled in all these different directions, and that's reflected in the Shinty of history in the area. The idea of playing a match with one half of one kind of ball and then the other half with the other kind of ball was quite imaginative at the time, I suppose, because there was a sense that the hair ball was becoming redundant and difficult to play and affecting the style of play, because the people of Badenoch were aware that there were other developments happening elsewhere, and the context of all of this was that there was a huge debate at the time about how Shinty was being played in different areas. You had different numbers of players, you had different numbers of everything happening all over the place. And the key point was that the ball was different. So to set a game up shows you they had a very kind of scientific approach to the game. And the difficulty with the hair ball was the construction and its durability. It just didn't last for the whole game. What they were finding with the leather ball, as they immediately found out in the game of two halves, if we can call it that, was that the leather ball was much better in terms of lasting for the whole game and enabled the players to play a different aerial type of game because the ball moved about and travelled faster. So it's historically a very important point in the development of Shinty as a game that they moved from one type of the ball. Even before then it would have been the wooden ball, so then the hair ball just didn't last, wasn't much use, and now we have a sustainable type of ball coming into play at that point. It's very often forgotten that Laggan as a Shinty team in their own right have a very strong tradition and actually were quite a powerful team round about the turn of the 1900s into the 20th century. Now we find that in 1900 specifically, for example, they won 3 trophies, the Kennedy Cammon, the Campbell Cup and the McTavish Cup, and then their highlight, I suppose the high point of all their play was in 1904. When they reached the final, for the only time ever, they reached the final of the Camanachd Cup, the game's top prize. And unfortunately, they lost 4-1 to Kyles, so that was their high point, but they did lose the final. It was commemorated in all sorts of poems, partly the controversy about Donald Catnach playing in the first match, but then in the final itself, I'll just read one verse of it. To Laggan team great honours due, their practice games were very few. The team are scattered far and wide, o'er hills and dales they had to stride. So that kind of sums up a lot of their history, where they were providing players for all sorts of other teams at different points in their history because they weren't strong enough. But on this one occasion, they managed to get to the Camanachd Cup final. Unfortunately for them, they met a better team on the day. The First World War had a huge impact on Badenoch in general, but on the smaller villages, Laggan for example, it's clear that decimated the whole area. I think if truth be told, Laggan has never really, just as many other villages and towns in the Highlands, have never really recovered from that generation they lost between 1914 and 1919. Really quite extraordinary to remark that now, 100 years after the end of the First World War, here we have Laggan players again appearing in Camanachd Cup finals, albeit that Ian Richardson, for example, is born and bred in Laggan and was in the successful Newtonmore team of the 2019 Camanachd Cup final, winning escapade. Owen Fraser, who also got a medal in that game, he's the son of a Laggan crofter and stalker. Ewan Fraser. Callum Grant, son of a farmer. Ewan Grant, a former Kingussie player, is now prominent in the Kingussie team. James Faulkner, he was also born and brought up in Laggan. His grandfather Donald has a neighbouring croft to Ewan Fraser. He's also prominent in the Kingussie team. Michael Slimmen just turned 16 at this point. He's playing in the Kingussie second team, and interestingly he's got a sister, Katie, who's a very talented athlete in her own right, and she's in Glasgow at a special school for athletes. Well, she comes back home and plays for the Badenoch ladies team. So here we are 100 years later, after Laggan's greatest hour, they're still doing what they did 100 years ago. Whether they'll ever get to the point of producing a team themselves, it's hard to see that happening. It would need a total transformation in terms of the community strength and the number of people living and working in that area. But who's to know? It might happen, it could happen, it would be great if it happened. But at the moment, they're happy to achieve their success through the success of their neighbours, if nothing else.
Well, the aim of Shinty Memories as a project is essentially to support those suffering and living with dementia and Alzheimer's. We do have quite a number in our community here, which is not commonly known, but we're aware of that, and what we're doing is to try and support them in the Memories project using our Shinty photography, our artefacts, and even the filming that we're actually about to produce or are producing at the present moment to use in the cafes and in support of those with dementia.